there's no doubt that Bitcoin is still struggling. And I think the biggest example of how Bitcoin is struggling right now is you obviously saw the collapse on the back of FTX. And then since then, the stock market until really the last week or so had been trending neutral to higher. And we didn't see that in the Bitcoin chart. Even though the Bitcoin chart usually follows risk assets like the stock market, we weren't seeing that. And that makes a lot of sense. Investors are nervous. They don't know what to believe, what not to believe in the crypto markets these days after FTX really threw a big curveball. And so I think for me, it's continuing to recognize the chart that we're in a downtrend. You can clearly see that, again, this is now another bearish pattern developing, and we probably have further downside. Again, I think we'll stop around, there'll be a big level around 12 to 13,000, but it wouldn't shock me to see us go down to 9,000 on the charts at this point. So I continue to be bearish in early 2023. I will say this, is that I expect Bitcoin to put in a bottom probably around mid-year, probably around $9,000. And I think finally it will coordinate with the next kind of bounce, although the bull market will take years to develop.
Technical analyst Gareth Soloway gave his outlook on the future of Bitcoin and the crypto markets going into 2023. He maintains his prediction that Bitcoin will bottom at around $9,000 or $10,000. He claims that the bear market will end sometime during 2023, and he believes that when this does happen, only whales will start to accumulate more Bitcoin, adding to their positions. Solway believes that many VC investors won't touch crypto until we see regulation, and after the FTX collapse, this may speed up the process. When this happens, Solway believes that big money investors who have been on the sidelines will enter the market, pumping the price of Bitcoin and starting the next bull run. Here's more of what Gareth had to say. But before we do that, if you enjoy finance videos, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and dropping your questions or comments below.
The grayscale situation is really a very important factor for Bitcoin. I think they're the biggest holder of Bitcoin.
Yes.
So if they went into bankruptcy, if they don't get the ability to switch it into an ETF and therefore are forced into this path, you would see a major dip. And it's one of those scenarios where for me, I'd probably put out a buy order and go to sleep on Bitcoin at like $3,000. I mean, it could be one of those scenarios where you see something like that occur.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about it is that if the government really wanted to get rid or really put roadblocks in crypto or in Bitcoin specifically, this would be one way they could do it. They could deny the grayscale conversion to an ETF. And by doing that, you're going to create some very hazardous periods. And again, remember, crypto's already like a wounded animal, right? I mean, it's already gotten some wounds. It's struggling. FTX didn't do us any favors here. If you wanted to put that nail in the coffin, that would be one way to do it. Let's hope that's not their intention.
Right. So what are your thoughts on whale movement in the waters in 23?
Yeah, so I think the whales do start nibbling. I think the key is to see some sort of framework. In fact, and again, I'm no whale by any stretch, but I have a small investment of my overall net worth in Bitcoin, a tiny bit in Ethereum as well. And the reason why I'm not ready to go in more right now is I want to know that we have some regulatory framework coming. And I think as soon as we get a hint of it, remember, the market and whales aren't going to wait for it to pass. They're not going to wait for it to become law. It's going to be the framework that we look at, and we could say, okay, this is what's going to most likely come to fruition, and then we're going to start to buy and accumulate. And that's really what I'm waiting for. But I think it does happen in 2023. I really liken the Lehman Brothers collapse in 08 to what happened with FTX in terms of each industry. From the ruins, we saw Dodd-Frank emerge in the banking markets. I think something like that will come across. And I also think you can look at the Lehman Brothers collapse and say, okay, how long did it take for investors to psychologically flush down before a bottom was made in the S&P 500?
Yeah.
And that was about 5 to 6 months. In addition, the S&P dropped about 45%. So if you look at when FTX occurred versus when Lehman, you go out 5 to 6 months and you drop Bitcoin down about 45%, which puts us give or take around that $10,000 level.
Yeah.
And that might give us a basis to kind of get involved as a long investor. And I think, again, you're going to see this coincide perfectly with that regulation being unveiled. It's going to be, this is what's exciting for me, is that to me, I finally see the end of the bear market. Doesn't mean we're going to roar back to all-time highs, but at least it's getting closer.
What do you make of this this statement in this report coming in right here? 40% of survey respondents plan to buy crypto in 2023. Do you think this is coming from retail, or do you feel this is more of mid-size investors that are starting to say, hey, it's really taken enough of a beating to where I'm not going to get hurt too much?
That's a good question. I mean, I would generally assume it was more the retail crowd. I did read that I think November there was the most investors ever bought into Bitcoin that owned less than one Bitcoin. So basically it was the small investor buying in, which number one, it tells me it's not quite the bottom yet, right? Generally, that's not the way bottoms work. It's usually the smaller investors are the ones freaking out while the whales accumulate. But I do think that you will get to a point when you get towards that 10,000 level-ish, give or take, where big money starts to say, all right, listen, what's my risk reward here? Do I think that Bitcoin's going to survive? How much is it down? Are we going to eventually get common sense regulation that clarifies where this thing can potentially go in the future? And I do think that digital gold is where it's going to be at for Bitcoin. Now, the security side, meaning the alts and how they're classified, that's a little grayer, right? Because we don't know, is it going to be like the same sort of regulation that stocks have to abide by, which doesn't really make sense? Or will there be a new set of ground rules for these alts that they have to do reporting and auditing and different things like that? And I hope it's a positive thing. It's one of those things that, again, there's a little bit of angst in me to see what that's going to be.
Yeah, I feel like based on, a lot of the conversations I've had with some lawmakers off the record, is that they feel that there's most likely going to be some sort of alternative classification that would at least align some sort of SEC and or CFTC governance. And if that is the case, because you remember, you were trying to apply rules, even if you look at the Howey test, trying to apply rules that are, in some cases 5-6 decades old. So we've got to get to a point where we're applying new, now today, financial tool rules that really apply to what's happening in blockchain. And I think the biggest concern that most of the lawmakers that I talk to off record that they're concerned with is losing the technology race in blockchain. Because if they're the one that was on the watch when the US lost the next internet, those are not legacies you want to leave behind.
No,
for
that
sure.
is not. Especially, regardless of where Bitcoin is, blockchain technology is here to stay. It's going to be the main driver, and there is so much that can kind of evolve off of it, off of these networks. So I agree with you, and I think the beautiful thing about it is that you now have a scenario where there's so many people that love crypto, that have jobs that in some way, shape, or form rely on crypto, that it makes it almost impossible to kind of get rid of it. It's just a matter of getting the proper regulation in place.
Thank you for watching our video. For more finance content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, when in doubt, just hodl.